In a quiet corner of the galaxy, far from the bustling centers of advanced civilizations, humanity clung to its fragile existence. Earth's people were newcomers to the stars, their technology impressive, but not enough to match the might of older, more powerful species. Humans were seen as weak, fragile bodies, short lives, and little ability to survive in harsh environments, made them easy targets for predators among the stars. But there was one group that tolerated them, the Deathworlders. The Deathworlders came from planets so deadly that even breathing the air could kill most other beings. Their worlds were filled with acid rains, crushing gravity, and monstrous creatures. Survival on such planets required strength, cunning, and an unrelenting will to live. To the Deathworlders, these traits were sacred, and they respected nothing less. Yet, for reasons no one fully understood, they had never wiped out humanity. Some said it was pity. Others thought it was amusement at humanity's attempts to grow stronger. Whatever the reason, humans lived under the shadow of these terrifying beings, always careful not to provoke them. On Earth's orbital station New Dawn life went on as usual. The station buzzed with activity. Scientists studied alien samples, engineers worked on new technologies, and diplomats tried to build alliances with friendlier species. Among the scientists was Daniel Harper, a young xenobiologist with messy brown hair and glasses that constantly slid down his nose. Daniel spent most of his days examining strange plants brought back by exploration teams. He loved his work, though his colleague Laura Bennett often teased him about it. "You're wasting your time with those weeds," Laura would say, leaning against the lab counter with her arms crossed. She was an engineer, practical and blunt, with sharp green eyes that missed nothing. "We should be figuring out how to defend ourselves, not poking at alien flowers." Daniel would laugh nervously and adjust his glasses. "These weeds might hold secrets we don't understand yet," he'd reply. "Every piece of knowledge helps." Despite their differences, Daniel and Laura got along well. They shared late-night coffee breaks, discussing everything from alien biology to the latest rumors about interstellar politics. One evening, while reviewing data logs, Daniel noticed something odd. There were patterns in communications between several Deathworld species. Normally, these species avoided each other unless trading or fighting. But now, their messages seemed coordinated. "Laura, look at this," Daniel said, pointing to his screen. "Doesn't this seem strange to you?" Laura leaned over, squinting at the lines of code. "It's just chatter," she said after a moment. "Probably nothing." But Daniel wasn't convinced. Something about the patterns nagged at him. He couldn't explain why, but he felt uneasy, like the calm before a storm. A few days later, that feeling proved right. Reports began flooding in from human colonies scattered across nearby systems. Ships belonging to various Deathworld species had appeared without warning. At first, it seemed like another raid, resources taken, survivors left behind. But then came the unthinkable. Entire populations were being wiped out, not for profit, not for territory, but simply because the Deathworlders chose to do it. Back on New Dawn panic spread quickly. Station Commander Richard Cole ordered everyone into lockdown, preparing for the worst. As alarms blared and people scrambled for safety, Daniel and Laura found themselves alone in the lab. "I told you it was nothing," Laura muttered, trying to sound calm despite the fear in her voice. Daniel shook his head. "No, this is exactly what I was afraid of." And deep down, both knew they were witnessing the beginning of something terrible. The attacks came swiftly and without mercy. One by one, human colonies fell to the Deathworlders' assault. Entire settlements were wiped out, their populations erased as if they had never existed. The Deathworlders showed no interest in resources or territory. They simply destroyed everything in their path. It was not a war for gain, but a calculated purge, carried out with chilling efficiency. On New Dawn news of the devastation reached Daniel Harper and Laura Bennett through fragmented transmissions and panicked reports. The station's communication channels buzzed with cries for help, followed by eerie silence as colony after colony went dark. Laura sat at her workstation, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she tried to piece together what little information they had. Her sharp green eyes scanned the data, searching for patterns or clues that might explain why this was happening. Daniel paced behind her, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that the strange communication patterns he'd noticed days earlier were connected to the attacks. "It's not random," he said finally, stopping in front of Laura. "They planned this." Laura didn't look up from her screen. "Of course they planned it. What are you saying, Daniel?" "I'm saying there's something bigger going on. This isn't just another raid. They're working together, species that usually hate each other. Why now? Why us?" Laura sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Maybe we finally annoyed them enough. Or maybe," she trailed off, her expression darkening, "maybe they decided we're too weak to bother keeping around anymore." Before Daniel could respond, an alert flashed across Laura's screen. She clicked on it, her brow furrowing as she read the contents. "This is weird," she muttered. "I hacked into some restricted channels. Listen to this." She played a recording of a distorted voice speaking in a guttural alien tongue. At first, it sounded like static, but then a phrase repeated itself, clearer than the rest. "Enough kindness." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means exactly what it sounds like," Laura said grimly. "They've been putting up with us because they thought we weren't worth the trouble. But now they've decided we're more trouble than we're worth." The weight of her words sank in. Humanity had survived among the stars not because they were strong, but because the Deathworlders had deemed them harmless. That tolerance had ended. As the hours passed, the situation grew worse. Refugees began arriving at New Dawn, their ships battered and leaking atmosphere. Among them was Emma Carter, a former soldier turned farmer who had lost everything in the attacks. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, but her voice was steady as she recounted the horrors she'd witnessed. "They didn't even stop to take anything," she said bitterly. "They just killed everyone. Men, women, children. It didn't matter." Commander Richard Cole called an emergency meeting to discuss their options. The station wasn't equipped for a prolonged fight, and reinforcements were days away, if they came at all. "We need a plan," Cole said, his grizzled face lined with worry. "If we don't act now, we'll be next." Daniel raised his hand hesitantly. "I think I might have an idea," he said. He explained his theory about the coordinated attacks and suggested targeting the source of the Deathworlders' communications. If they could disrupt their coordination, it might buy humanity time to regroup. Laura nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it could work. I can modify some of our equipment to jam their signals, or better yet, hack into them." Emma stepped forward, her fists clenched. "Count me in. I'm not sitting here waiting to die." Cole looked at the group, weighing their chances. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "All right, we'll hit them where it hurts. But we do this carefully. One mistake, and we're finished." As the meeting broke up, Daniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. For years, humanity had lived under the shadow of the Deathworlders, surviving on borrowed time. Now that time had run out. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. The days of relying on kindness, or even indifference, were over. The decision to fight back ignited a spark of hope among the survivors on New Dawn. Though fear still lingered in the air, people began to rally together, determined to resist the Deathworlders' onslaught. Emma Carter quickly emerged as a leader, her fierce determination inspiring others to join the cause. She spent hours organizing volunteers, assigning roles based on skills and experience. Some would handle communications, others repairs, and a few, the bravest, would prepare for combat. Laura Bennett threw herself into modifying equipment, working tirelessly in the station's engineering bay, using scavenged parts from damaged ships and scraps of alien technology. She designed makeshift weapons capable of piercing even the toughest exoskeletons. Her hands moved quickly, welding tools and rewiring circuits with precision. Daniel Harper stayed by her side, helping where he could, though his mind was often elsewhere. He pored over data collected from captured specimens, searching for weaknesses in the Deathworlders' biology. Each discovery brought them closer to a fighting chance. Commander Richard Cole oversaw the operation, ensuring everyone stayed focused despite the looming threat. "We don't have much time," he reminded them during briefings. "If we're going to hit back, we need to do it fast." Their plan was bold, a daring assault on a key Deathworld stronghold orbiting a dying star. This facility served as a central hub for their coordinated attacks, making it a critical target. If they could disable it, they might disrupt the Deathworlders' ability to work together. But getting there would be dangerous. The stronghold was heavily guarded, and their fleet consisted of civilian vessels retrofitted for battle. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. Among the pilots chosen for the mission was Jake Thompson, a hot-headed mechanic with a reputation for taking risks. Jake wasn't a soldier, but he knew how to fly, and his quick reflexes made him invaluable. He spent hours practicing maneuvers in the simulator, pushing the limits of what their patched-up ships could handle. When Emma approached him one evening, he grinned confidently. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll get us through." Emma nodded, though her expression remained serious. "Just remember, this isn't about showing off. We're doing this for everyone who didn't make it." As preparations continued, tensions ran high. Supplies were limited, and tempers flared over disagreements about strategy. Laura worked late into the night, fine-tuning her designs, while Daniel double-checked calculations. Neither spoke much, their exhaustion evident in the dark circles under their eyes. Still, they pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that failure meant extinction. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. The makeshift fleet gathered near the edge of the system, engines humming softly as crews prepared for launch. Inside the command center, Commander Cole addressed the team one last time. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. "We've done everything we can. Now it's up to you. Stick to the plan, watch each other's backs, and don't give up. Humanity is counting on us." Emma stood beside him, her gaze sweeping across the room. She locked eyes with Daniel, then Laura, and finally Jake. Each face reflected a mix of fear and resolve. They weren't soldiers or heroes. They were ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Yet in that moment, they felt united by a shared purpose. As the ships launched into the void, heading toward the Deathworld stronghold, no one spoke. The vastness of space stretched before them, cold and unforgiving. Ahead lay danger, death, and the possibility of salvation. Whatever happened next, they knew one thing for certain: humanity's survival depended on their success. The fleet approached the Deathworld stronghold under the cover of darkness, their ships gliding silently through the void. The structure loomed ahead, a jagged monolith surrounded by smaller vessels that swarmed like insects. Plasma turrets bristled along its surface, ready to unleash destruction at a moment's notice. For a brief moment, the Ractic human fleet hesitated, dwarfed by the sheer scale of what lay before them. "Here we go," Jake muttered, gripping the controls of his ship. His voice crackled over the comms as he addressed the others. "Stay sharp, everyone. Follow the plan." Emma Carter led the charge, her ship taking point as they entered the enemy's defensive perimeter. Almost immediately, alarms blared, and the Deathworlders responded with overwhelming force. Streams of plasma fire erupted from the stronghold, lighting up the blackness of space. Pilots dodged and weaved, their ships groaning under the strain of evasive maneuvers. Explosions flared around them as several vessels were hit, their wreckage drifting lifelessly into the void. "Stick together," Emma shouted over the chaos. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through the panic that threatened to overwhelm the inexperienced crew. She guided her ship toward a cluster of enemy fighters, drawing their attention while Jake and the others slipped past. It was a risky move, but it worked. The Deathworlders focused their firepower on her, giving the rest of the fleet a chance to reach the facility. Inside the stronghold, infiltration teams prepared to breach the outer defenses. Daniel Harper clutched a handheld scanner, his hands trembling slightly as he monitored the structure's layout. Laura Bennett stayed close, her weapon drawn and her eyes scanning for threats. They moved cautiously through narrow corridors, the air thick with the scent of metal and something faintly acidic. Strange sounds echoed around them, clicks, hisses, and the scrape of claws against the floor. "This way," Daniel whispered, pointing to a map on his scanner. "The control hub is just ahead." Before they could advance, a group of Deathworld soldiers appeared, their towering forms blocking the path. Their exoskeletons gleamed menacingly in the dim light, and their glowing eyes locked onto the intruders. Without hesitation, Laura opened fire, her shot striking one of the creatures squarely in its chest. It staggered but didn't fall, its massive body shrugging off the impact. The team returned fire, their weapons barely scratching the surface of the beast's armor. "We can't hold them off forever," Laura yelled, ducking behind a piece of debris as plasma bolts whizzed past her head. Daniel glanced at his scanner again, his mind racing. "There's a weak spot, a joint in their exoskeletons near the neck. Aim there." Emma's voice broke in over the comms. "We're running out of time. Do whatever it takes to disable that hub." With renewed focus, the team adjusted their aim, targeting the vulnerable areas Daniel had identified. One by one, the Deathworld soldiers fell, their bodies collapsing with sickening thuds. But more were coming, their guttural roars echoing down the hallway. Finally, they'd reached the control hub. Daniel rushed to the central console, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar interface as he tried to override the system. "I need a minute," he called out, sweat dripping from his brow. Laura stood guard, firing steadily at the approaching enemies. Each shot felt like it might be her last, but she refused to falter. Behind her, Daniel worked frantically, muttering under his breath as lines of code scrolled across the screen. "I've got it," he exclaimed suddenly. With a final keystroke, the lights flickered and the hum of machinery slowed. The Deathworlders' coordination began to falter, their movements less precise as the stronghold's systems went offline. But their victory was short-lived. Reinforcements poured into the chamber, cutting off their escape route. Trapped and outnumbered, the team exchanged grim looks. They had succeeded in crippling the stronghold, but now survival seemed impossible. Just as the team braced for what seemed like certain death, a voice crackled over their comms. It was Ryan Mitchell, one of the pilots who had accompanied the mission. His ship had been damaged earlier in the battle, and he'd dropped out of contact shortly after. No one expected to hear from him again, let alone in the control hub. "Don't move," Ryan said coldly, stepping into the room with his weapon raised. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he aimed at Daniel and Laura. Behind him, the Deathworld soldiers paused, watching silently. "What are you doing, Ryan?" Laura demanded, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You're supposed to be on our side." Ryan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked almost ashamed. But then his expression hardened. "I'm doing what's best for humanity," he snapped. "We can't win this fight. The Deathworlders are stronger, faster, smarter. They'll crush us no matter what we do. If we want to survive, we have to join them." Daniel stared at him, horrified. "You think they'll let us live? They've already made it clear they see us as nothing but pests." "They might," Ryan insisted, though his voice wavered. "If we prove useful, if we show them we're willing to adapt, humanity doesn't stand a chance otherwise." Emma stepped forward, her weapon trained on Ryan. "You're wrong," she said firmly. "Running away won't save us. Fighting back is the only way." Ryan hesitated, glancing between Emma and the Deathworld soldiers behind him. Then, without warning, he turned and fired at the control panel Daniel had just hacked. Sparks flew as the system shorted out, plunging the room into darkness. Alarms blared, and the Deathworlders roared in confusion. "Now!" Emma shouted, taking advantage of the chaos. She lunged at Ryan, tackling him to the ground. Their weapons clattered across the floor as they struggled, each trying to overpower the other. Laura grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him toward the exit, firing blindly at the approaching soldiers. The fight between Emma and Ryan was brutal. He was stronger, but she was fueled by anger and desperation. With a final burst of strength, she disarmed him and slammed his own weapon against the door controls. The heavy metal doors slid shut, sealing them inside the control hub and cutting off their escape route. "You've killed us all," Ryan screamed, pounding on the doors. Beyond them, the Deathworld soldiers began regrouping, their guttural growls growing louder. Emma ignored him, turning to the others. "We need another way out," she said quickly. "Laura, can you override the lockdown?" Laura shook her head, her fingers flying over her scanner. "It'll take too long. The system's fried." Daniel looked around frantically, his eyes landing on a ventilation shaft near the ceiling. "There," he said, pointing. "We can use that to get out." Without hesitation, they climbed up, squeezing through the narrow passage as the sound of claws scraping metal echoed below. The shaft led to an access tunnel, dimly lit and filled with the hum of machinery. They moved as quickly as they could, their breaths ragged and hearts pounding. Behind them, the Deathworlders breached the control hub, their roars echoing through the facility. Ryan's voice faded into the distance, pleading for mercy. None of them looked back. When they finally emerged onto the surface, the battle above raged on. Ships exchanged fire in the sky, explosions lighting up the darkness. Jake spotted their signal and swooped in low, picking them up before the enemy could react. As they escaped into space, the weight of their losses settled heavily on their shoulders. Ryan's betrayal had cost them dearly, but they had survived for now. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain: humanity would not go down without a fight. Back on New Dawn, the survivors regrouped, battered but determined. The mission to disable the Deathworld stronghold had been a partial success. Their enemy's coordination was disrupted, but at a heavy cost. Ryan's betrayal still weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Though they had escaped with their lives, the loss of trust stung deeply. Laura worked tirelessly in the engineering bay, analyzing data recovered during the mission, while Daniel studied alien specimens for any remaining weaknesses. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding their foe and finding a way to strike back. As Laura sifted through fragmented transmissions and schematics, she uncovered something critical. The Deathworlders relied on centralized command structures. Every species operated independently, but when united under a single leader or directive, their power multiplied exponentially. This insight gave Commander Richard Cole an idea, a bold, risky plan that could turn the tide of the war. "There's one place we haven't hit yet," Cole said during a briefing, his voice low but firm. "Their homeworld." The room fell silent. The Deathworld homeworld was legendary, a planet so hostile that even its native inhabitants struggled to survive. It was said to be the cradle of their civilization, the source of their strength and unity. Attacking it would be suicide. But if they succeeded, it could shatter the Deathworlders' resolve. "We don't have much time," Daniel added, standing beside Cole. "They're regrouping faster than we expected. If we don't act now, they'll come for us again. And next time, we might not survive." Emma Carter nodded, her expression grim. "Then we hit them where it hurts. We take the fight to their doorstep." Preparations began immediately. Using scavenged parts and stolen technology, Laura designed new weapons tailored to exploit the vulnerabilities Daniel had identified. She also modified the fleet's engines for maximum speed, knowing they'd need every advantage to reach the Deathworld homeworld alive. Pilots like Jake Thompson trained relentlessly, practicing maneuvers in simulators until their reflexes were razor-sharp. Meanwhile, Daniel made a startling discovery. By studying captured Deathworld DNA, he realized why they feared humanity so much. Humans were adaptable, capable of surviving in environments that would kill most other species. Over generations, humans had evolved rapidly, learning to thrive in places once thought uninhabitable. To the Deathworlders, this unpredictability posed an existential threat. Their campaign wasn't just about wiping out weakness, it was about stopping humanity before it became too strong. Armed with this knowledge, the team prepared for the final assault. As the fleet launched into space, heading toward the Deathworld homeworld, tension filled the air. No one spoke much, each person lost in their own thoughts. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew there was no turning back. When they arrived, the sight was awe-inspiring and terrifying. The planet was a swirling mass of storms, its surface covered in jagged mountains and rivers of molten lava. Acidic clouds churned overhead, spitting lightning across the sky. Even from orbit, the hostility of the environment was palpable. "This is insane," Jake muttered as he guided his ship through the turbulent atmosphere. "How are we supposed to survive down there?" "We don't have to survive," Emma replied calmly. "We just have to win." The ground teams landed near a massive fortress carved into the side of a mountain. Inside, they fought their way through waves of monstrous guards, their every step echoing with the sound of claws scraping stone floors. Daniel carried a scanner, guiding them toward the central chamber where the Deathworld leader resided. Laura stayed close, her weapon ready to fend off attackers. Finally, they reached the throne room. There, towering over them, was the leader, a hulking creature with glowing eyes and armored skin. Its presence radiated power, and for a moment, doubt crept into their hearts. But Emma stepped forward, her weapon raised. "You picked the wrong species to mess with," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. And with that, the battle began. The battle in the throne room was chaos. The Deathworld leader roared, its massive form shaking the ground as it lunged toward Emma. She dodged just in time, her weapon firing a burst of energy that glanced off its armored hide. Behind her, Laura and Daniel worked together, trying to find a way to weaken the creature. Laura fired steadily at its joints, while Daniel scanned for vulnerabilities, his hands trembling as he analyzed the data. "Its chest," Daniel shouted finally. "There's a weak spot, right below the throat." Emma nodded, gritting her teeth as she rolled away from another attack. She aimed carefully, squeezing the trigger. The shot hit its mark, and the creature staggered, letting out an ear-splitting screech. But it wasn't enough to bring it down. It swiped at Emma with claws like daggers, forcing her to dive behind a pillar for cover. "We need more firepower," Laura yelled, reloading her weapon. She glanced at Jake, who had been providing support from a nearby ledge. "Jake now." Jake didn't hesitate. He leaped down from his perch, landing hard but steady. With a shout, he unleashed a barrage of modified plasma rounds directly at the creature's exposed chest. The impact sent it stumbling backward, its glowing eyes dimming as it collapsed to one knee. For a moment, the room fell silent except for the sound of ragged breathing. Then, with a final defiant roar, the creature toppled over, its massive body crashing to the ground. Dust filled the air as the survivors caught their breath, their weapons still raised in case it wasn't truly over. When nothing moved, Emma stepped forward cautiously, kicking aside a piece of debris before turning to face the others. "It's done," she said quietly, though her voice carried through the chamber. "We did it." But their victory came at a cost. The fortress around them began to crumble, destabilized by the loss of its leader. Alarms blared as the structure shook violently, chunks of rock falling from the ceiling. "Move," Laura shouted, grabbing Daniel's arm and pulling him toward the exit. They ran as fast as they could, dodging falling debris and leaping over cracks that split the floor. Outside, the fleet waited anxiously, engines idling as the planet's violent environment raged around them. One by one, the ground teams boarded their ships, taking off just as the fortress collapsed into the fiery depths below. As they ascended into orbit, the sight of the crumbling stronghold served as a grim reminder of what they had sacrificed and achieved. Back on New Dawn news of their success spread quickly. Though battered and grieving, humanity celebrated their improbable victory. The Deathworlders' unity shattered without their leader, their coordinated attacks dissolving into infighting among rival species. Humanity had earned a fragile peace, but one built on strength rather than kindness. In the weeks that followed, stories of the battle traveled far beyond Earth's borders. Some species viewed humanity with fear, seeing them as dangerous upstarts. Others admired their resilience, recognizing them as worthy adversaries. For better or worse, the galaxy now saw Earth as a force to be reckoned with. On the observation deck of New Dawn Daniel stood gazing at the stars, his mind replaying everything they had endured. Beside him, Laura leaned against the railing, her arms crossed. "We're not weak anymore," she said softly, breaking the silence. Daniel nodded, adjusting his glasses. "No, we're not. But I hope we never forget what it cost us." As they looked out at the endless expanse of space, both knew the fight wasn't truly over. Humanity's place among the stars was secured, but survival would always demand vigilance. Still, for the first time in a long while, there was hope, not just for survival, but for a future where humanity could stand tall, unafraid to face whatever challenges lay ahead.